everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the value of board certification for medical affairs and MSL professionals. We're so glad to have you joining us today from all over, looks like in the chat so far. Now, before we dive in, why don't you take a moment in the chat if you haven't yet and let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always great to see the diversity of our attendees and where they're joining from. So we'll allow about 1 to 2 minutes for you to enter that into the chat and for others to join in, and then we can go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. My name is Kiana Dixon, and I will act as your moderator for this insightful session this afternoon. Today, we're excited to explore the importance of board certification for medical affairs and medical science liaisons. And here at the ACMA, we are hosting this webinar to provide you with valuable insights on the competencies and the expertise required in this dynamic field of medical affairs. Today, you will hear from two esteemed professionals and leaders within medical affairs. We first have Dr. Emmanuel Cayo. He is currently the Regional Senior Medical Director of Medical Affairs and Professional Education at Edwards Life Sciences. He has a proven track record of success in various therapeutic and diagnostic fields. Emmanuel is a seasoned expert in identifying, interacting with, and managing thought leaders and rising stars across top 8 markets and emerging countries, both on strategic dimension and tactical activities in the life sciences. We are also joined by Dr. Julio Fernandez, a licensed pharmacist with extensive experience in the pharmaceutical industry. Having held roles in medical information, sales training, medical science liaison, and currently acting as the director for North America engagement at Regeneron. Now, during this webinar today, Emmanuel and Julio will share their unique perspectives on the value of board certification for medical affairs. And we will cover the key competency areas, the benefits of a board certification program, and also real-world implementation insights of a board certification from their own experiences. As always, we will also leave time for a question and answer session at the end. So please feel free to submit your questions that you have throughout the first half of this webinar as we navigate through today's discussion so that we can address those questions at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get started. Again, in today's webinar, we will explore the 5 critical competencies that every successful medical affairs professional should possess and why each one is so important in this industry. We'll then discuss how the BCMAS, the Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist Program, can help medical affairs professionals develop and demonstrate their expertise in these 5 key areas. We'll also hear directly from our esteemed guest speakers about their experiences and perspectives on the BCMS program and how it has been implemented within their own career as well as their organizations. So let's go ahead and dive into the heart of our discussion today. The 5 key areas of competency that are critical for medical affairs professionals and medical science liaisons. The 5 key areas of competency that we'll be exploring today were developed by ACMA through an extensive advisory board process with industry-leading experts in medical affairs. ACMA convened a panel of senior medical affairs professionals from top pharmaceutical companies to identify the core skills, the core knowledge that defines excellence in this field. These leaders all had decades of experience driving impact at some of the most innovative organizations in the industry. So after a thorough review with that board, they landed on 5 critical pillars that encompass the necessary competencies for medical affairs and MSL professionals. And this forms the basis or the structure of the curriculum of the official board certification for medical affairs, the BCMAS program. So while we'll dive deeper into each of these areas during our discussion, let me briefly introduce them to you here. The 5 key competency areas for medical affairs are technical competencies, life sciences understanding, regulatory and compliance, soft skills and business acumen, as well as processes. These standards, again, represent the comprehensive skill set required to truly excel in these roles and deliver exceptional value to your organizations and therefore ultimately the patients that you serve. Throughout today's webinar, our esteemed speakers, they will explore the importance of each of these competencies and share insights on how to develop these capabilities. So let's get started with the first area, life sciences understanding. As identified by our ad board, this competency goes beyond just the traditional pharmaceutical industry, right? It encompasses an in-depth understanding of the broader life sciences ecosystem, including medical devices, diagnostics, and even emerging areas like artificial intelligence. Now, I'd like to turn to our speakers, Emmanuel and Julio, to share their thoughts on why this breadth of life sciences knowledge is so critical for medical affairs. Emmanuel, Julio, why is an understanding of the full life sciences scope important for medical affairs and MSLs?
Thanks, Kiana. Thanks for the introduction. I hope the connection is good. I am currently attending this webinar from a hotel room somewhere in Europe. And this is a kind of perfect introduction. We, in medical affairs, do have a customer-facing position. I mean, we are not in sales, this is obvious, but we are visiting customers almost every week, and for some of us, several times a week. And I think this is absolutely critical to remain on the edge and clearly understand all the various aspects of the relationship between industry and physicians, so that we are a source of knowledge and help in their practice. But in the meantime, we are remaining particularly accurate when it comes to compliance, the level of interaction we can have. And that's the kind of information we will get, or you will get, if you go through that training and certification. So that's essentially my message. We are in customer-facing position. We need to master the level of the interaction with physicians, and that's something that needs to be learned or relearned at some point in our careers.
Great, and from my perspective, I totally agree with Emmanuel. But not even in the field-facing roles, but even in headquarters, understanding how we can communicate with each other, and understanding that there are different guidelines, there are different pharmaceutical companies as well as medical device companies and diagnostics that may interact a little bit differently and may have different sets of rules and regulations. But if we're able to understand all of these different types of industries, in the end, we're able to effectively communicate with each other and understand how people can work and cannot work together. So that's from my perspective.
I think these are great insights. And what I'm hearing from you both is that you have to have this broad understanding for both the external and the internal side of your role, right? Your responsibilities. You can stay ahead of the curve, anticipate the changing needs of your stakeholders and your partners. While internally, you have to enhance that cross-functional support, right? You can help different functions across the board, from commercial, regulatory, even research and development that comes across. Now, tying this to board certification, the BCMAS program, that Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist program, its curriculum covers this competency through the very first 3 modules, where we discuss key stakeholders, unique regulatory considerations for medical device versus the diagnostics industry. We also cover AI and their implications for medical affairs from the very start in this board certification program. Next, let's dive into the regulatory and compliance competency area. This is a critical pillar that ensures medical affairs professionals and MSLs, they operate within the appropriate ethical and compliance guidelines. This competency focuses on understanding the relevant regional regulatory bodies, the submissions and review processes for applications, as well as the nuances of interacting with external stakeholders in a compliant manner. Emmanuel and Julio, can you share your perspective on why this regulatory and compliance knowledge is also important for medical affairs?
To me, I've been in the compliance role before, and compliance is a key role within the organization, and it's agnostic to whatever role you have within the organization. Compliance is needed at every role because we want to make sure that what we're doing is done right and that we're not in violation of any pharma codes. That helps us stay out of the news for the wrong reasons, right? Because as we're interacting, whether you're in the field or you're in headquarters, as you're interacting with healthcare providers, you want to make sure that you're doing it appropriately. And if we're doing things appropriately, we build trust with our HCPs. We establish trust with them, and they're more likely to want to work with us because they know that we're doing things ethically. So to me, having that knowledge is key, whether you're in the field or you're in headquarters, because we all interact with healthcare providers and we want to do that appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fully aligned with Julio again, and at the end of the day, it's all about patient care, and we are not interacting directly with patients in most of our jobs, but the interactions we have with physicians will at some point impact patient care in the form of diagnostic or treatment. And to that respect, we need to ensure all kind of interactions, recommendations, advice we have with HCPs are reaching a level of, let's say, higher standard, so that the impact they have on their patients, they feel comfortable because of the information and the interactions they had with us. So we are all patient at some point in our life, and I think this is very important. We keep this in mind, and to that respect, all the regulatory, ethical, compliant topics are absolutely critical to be mastered by people like us, both in headquarters or field-based people. Yeah.
Now, Julio, adding onto your point of the compliance team and the compliance role in the pharma organization, you mentioned that the compliance is a key component for every role at really every stage. To you, is it enough for an organization to already have that compliance team and the individuals themselves to only depend on the compliance team to ensure that their interactions are compliant?
No, I think every individual needs to take accountability as well. And by knowing what the compliance regulations are, by understanding what is black, what is white, and knowing that there's always a gray area. It helps us make more informed decisions. As I was a leader in the field, I wanted to get a deeper understanding of compliance. And that's kind of why I went to a compliance role, because I wanted to be able to explain the why. It's good to have a compliance officer and compliance advisors within the organization, but we also need to be accountable for that. That there's certain times where we don't need to reach out to our compliance folks if we know what the rules and regulations are and what is right to do, or what can we do based on the pharma code. So we all need to be accountable for that.
You highlight the pharma code.
If I may extend on that, because Julio had a compliance position at some point, which is not my case. I was flying back from a congress this last Saturday, and I was thinking of something related to the MedTech Code of Conduct, the European code, for the interaction between medical device company and HCPs. And clearly, I will never, ever be a specialist of compliance. However, I believe we, as leaders, we have to play a kind of role model for our team members. And it is important we have good, solid understanding of compliance, general principles, so that when we have questions, from time to time, we are obliged to go to our VP of compliance or to a referral person for compliance in our companies. But I think this is important. We master it sufficiently so that we are comfortable to play a role, to be like a role model. So to that respect, yes, I think Julio and I, again, we have more or less the same vision on that point.
That's a great point, Emmanuel. Yep. Regulations also can vary significantly by region, right, and country, as we can, I'm sure Emmanuel could speak to as the region leader in his organization. So it's critical that we have a deep understanding of the specific guidelines and the requirements that really govern our work. Now, to further reinforce this competency, the BCMS program covers regulatory and compliance topics through these modules here. The BCMS program, like we mentioned before, we understand that regulations vary from region to region, right? The FDA governs the US, but not EU, the EU region. It's the EMA. So we have multiple regional variations of the BCMS program that highlights the regulatory affairs that governs that region. Right? These modules that you see here delve into the ethical guidelines, the regulatory bodies, submission and review processes, all of these compliance considerations that medical affairs professionals must navigate. And by mastering these areas, you can ensure that your interactions and communications on an individual level, like Julio mentioned, really uphold the highest standards of integrity and responsibility. Now, the next key competency area we'll explore is the core technical competencies. And this, I would mention, is the bedrock of medical affairs expertise. Clinical trials are the cornerstone of evidence-based medicine, and the data that they generate forms the backbone, again, of a medical affairs professional's toolkit. This technical knowledge provides the foundation for product knowledge, data interpretation, as well as the development of educational materials. And this is a discussion that we've had previously with our speakers. And I'm interested for you both to share your insights on your thoughts on why EBM, clinical trial analysis, and HEOR, right, are considered core competencies and are so critical for medical affairs and MSLs.
Julio, you want to start?
Sure. So I think from a competencies perspective, the more well-rounded that we are, the more credible we are with our healthcare providers. So understanding the pharmacoeconomics aspects to drug therapy, or how clinical trials are designed, and looking at evidence-based medicine, I think those are all topics that like a field-based team should be aware of, and even a headquarters team, because we show that we can be well-rounded. And as I previously mentioned, if you are well-rounded, then you're more knowledgeable, and you establish more credibility with our healthcare providers. And some of these topics are very keen for healthcare providers, such as a pharmacoeconomics or HEOR. So if we can have good conversations with them and provide value back to the HCPs.
I mean, the modules dedicated to evidence-based medicine in the course are probably among the best ones, with the level of detail which is reached. I mean, the vision I have for evidence-based medicine is the never-ending debate we see in all our specialties between randomized clinical trials and real-world data. And today, it's unclear, in particular at the HCP level, how should they weight, how should they balance between RCTs and real-world experience or real-world data. And I think this is really important that the people in medical affairs, I mean, and again, feeling that we were really supportive functions, interacting with physicians outside of the commercial team, we should be really on the edge when it comes to these notions and to these aspects, because this is coming on a regular basis as questions, and this is something we should be able to address. It doesn't mean we have to be able to write a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine. Again, that's absolutely not the point, but we should be able to read, understand, and let's say explain a paper in Lancet or the New England. And that's something that requires some technical competencies, definitely.
So I couldn't agree more here. The technical foundation, this is crucial for successful product development, crucial for launch. So mastering these areas, we can provide that invaluable support. Again, the benefits we have for the recent competencies to cross-functional teams as well as external stakeholders as well. Now, as we've discussed here, the BCMS program covers the modules that we talked about, HEOR, evidence-based medicine, as well as laying out the foundations of how to analyze clinical trials and clinical trial designs. And by completing these modules, medical affairs teams, they can build a comprehensive technical knowledge base that serves again as the foundation for their work, foundation for the credibility within the organization themselves. Usually when speaking to medical directors and those leaders in medical affairs who implement the BCMS program, this is the area that they want to ensure that everyone on their team is level set on. Whether you have plenty of years of experience or if you're newer on, they want this foundation for all of their medical affairs or MSL teams. The next competency area we'll discuss is soft skills and business acumen. While technical expertise is critical, effective communication and presentation skills are equally paramount, right, for MSLs and medical affairs. And this competency focuses on the ability to clearly and concisely explain complex scientific data to diverse audiences, from HCPs to patients to your industry colleagues, right? And adapting or adopting your communication style to the needs of each stakeholder is essential. Now, from your insights, can you share to us which soft skills are most important for medical affairs and MSL roles?
That's not an easy question. Julio, I guess, what do you think? I'm a little bit dry on this one. It's difficult.
I think it's around the whole communication aspect, right? Because as we're communicating with healthcare providers, we want to know what they want and how to communicate it to that specific audience. Because in my opinion, if you're speaking to a nurse, you're going to communicate a little bit differently than what you're going to communicate to a physician and how you communicate to that physician. And even within the physicians, somebody at an academic institution may want to go deeper into the science versus someone at a community site. So being able to tailor your message and being able to tailor what you want to communicate is important. And understanding and listening as well, right? Understanding what the physician wants and listening to that physician and being able to hold a dialogue. I think that's key. Sometimes we tend to focus on presenting data where we should be focusing on discussing the data and making it a dialogue versus a monologue, and understanding the entire landscape. So there's multiple factors in there, but I think overall the communication of data, the healthcare population and what they want to hear, I think is key.
What they want to hear is key.
Almost 30 years ago, when I was a young physician, actually a resident, one of my first boss, physician at the hospital, used to say to me, in terms of communication, his mantra was never underestimate the audience. And by this, he wanted to emphasize that you need, if you want to be a good communicator, and that's particularly true for medical affairs or medical science liaison, you need to perfectly understand to whom you're speaking, what are the expectations of people you're speaking to, so that your content, I mean, whatever you say, is going to be appropriate and adapt to the audience. And I think probably something I'm trying to do and teach to the people I'm working with is try to find out what the audience is expecting, what are they looking for, what do they want to discuss about, what kind of level do they have, how much time do they have ahead of them today? I mean, like 5 minutes or 2 hours. So this never underestimate the audience resonates to me again and again as that's something we need to take into account if we want to be good communicators.
And another thing I like to add is looking at where we are today in the landscape of communication. You know, maybe 4 years ago, we wouldn't have thought about communicating virtually like we're doing now, where everything was mostly face-to-face. But since the COVID era, we're engaging more with HCPs in a virtual setting. So how do we tailor our communication style to that approach of engaging virtually? Because it's sometimes it's different than having that face to face at times.
Yes, that's a very important aspect of communication that we may not have focused on before prior to COVID, right? When everyone's working from home and prefer virtual interactions. So it sounds like, with Emmanuel, not underestimating your audience. It all comes down to adaptability. That's what it sounds like. Being able to tailor your communication depending on the needs, the personality types, again, the needs of the HCP. Meet them where they are and what they're looking for. To develop these critical soft skills and build that business acumen, Module 8 in BSMAS was developed by both medical affairs experts and communication experts, right? We wanted to have this combination to really hone in on the essential communication capabilities that are required for medical affairs teams. In this module, we go over everything we just talked about here. The need for you to change your personality types or your communication based on personality types. How to engage virtually via Zoom or via webcam. How to dress professionally, right, for those webcams. We give you all of those insights and tidbits here. And these are great for, again, medical directors who are looking to level set and increase this knowledge base across their entire team. Now, the final key competency area we'll explore today is processes. These are the ins and outs of the critical functional areas within medical affairs. And this centers on ensuring medical affairs professionals have a comprehensive understanding of all of the key processes that are involved in their day-to-day responsibilities. Right? This includes everything from compliant publication practices and advisory boards to CME and post-marketing studies. Now, to you, Emmanuel and Julio, why is it so important to understand what your cross-functional counterparts in medical affairs, MedInfo, MedComs, for example, why is it important for you to understand what they do as part of their responsibilities? Why is this competency important?
I mean, the jigsaw. I mean, the various number of stakeholders we are interacting with on a daily basis for a bunch of projects increased these 25, 30 years. And we reach a level of complexity which is now really, it is what it is. So instead of complaining, I think this is very important to have a good understanding of the various process. I mean, you listed, for example, here, advisory board or investigator-sponsor research. I mean, these are typical examples of things that all companies are doing on a regular basis, for which a number of stakeholders are in the loop. So for me, not mastering this process, not understanding this process, not taking the time to discover this process, I think is a mistake, because you're going to lose time. And this is something we don't have. So it looks obvious, but yes, I think this is important. We have a good understanding of all this process.
To me, also understanding the process is also understanding the activities themselves, right? So if we understand the activities that other folks within the organization are doing, it allows us also to understand what our role is in some of these activities. And out throughout an investigator-sponsored research, there's multiple stakeholders in medical affairs that may touch an investigator-initiated study, from maybe the MSL in the field, fielding that concept, and then also the medical review process, and then communicating back to the HCP around their proposal. So there's multiple stakeholders in there that allows us to see who's involved in each step of the process. And the same thing happens with other medical affairs activities, ranging from as you mentioned, the ad boards or medical education events. So if we know the process, we're better able to serve that customer and to work more closely together as a medical affairs team.
Yes. You have to develop this expertise across these processes in order to drive that successful collaboration in tandem with the compliance. Now, the BCMAS program, the Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist program that we've been discussing, is this comprehensive online self-paced certification that covers the 5 key competency areas that we've discussed today. Now, in total, the program consists of 20 modules, each designed to build your expertise across those critical skills and knowledge that's required for that excellence. Board certification for medical affairs professionals is within over 250 companies today. I can see this becoming the mainstay accreditation and standard for the industry in the next few years. And the BCMAS program itself is the very first accredited board certification in medical affairs. The target audience for this program includes medical affairs professionals, of course, medical science liaisons, medical information specialists, everyone across that continuum or that umbrella of medical affairs. I mentioned that this program is entirely online and self-paced, allowing you to learn at your own convenience and fit it into your busy schedule. It is also vetted and accredited by ISET, our accreditors, the international accreditors for continuing education and training. We really, here at ACMA, wanted to design the BCMAS to be a comprehensive, flexible, and accredited pathway to elevate your expertise. And Emmanuel and Julio are both BCMAS graduates. And as leaders in the field with medical affairs, your insights are incredibly valuable for our audience. That's why they joined here today, right? Now, Julio, I understand you've gone through the BCMAS certification yourself. Can you share what the experience was like for you and how it impacted your career development?
Yeah, so I took the program a few years back, but I felt it was valuable. Having at one point when I took this, I had a lot of experience in field medical, but not necessarily around the other aspects of medical affairs. That actually even going and reading a little bit more around the compliance aspect to it, it allowed me to kind of make a career change over to compliance for a few years to get a deeper understanding of compliance. So it kind of spurred an interest there, but it also allowed me to get that overall picture of what the medical affairs organization is like at that time, having limited experience with mostly field medical. I think it's a beneficial program. It does take some time to devote to it. So it's something that, from a perspective, is dedicating some time to learn the information that's in the modules. But again, I found it very, very useful.
Thank you, Julio, for that insightful perspective. Emmanuel, you on the other side, you completed the BCMAS program for yourself, but your organization has also implemented the program. Can you share your experience with that and the impact you've seen?
Not super stable right now. I hope you can hear me. So I've been for the training course as well. You hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me check if I can do something better.
No problem. I think we can hear you, Emmanuel. You may not can hear us.
Let me check what I can do better from a connection standpoint.
No problem. While Emmanuel reconnects, what I've heard from Julio is that he had a profound impact on his experience.
Yeah,
right, for
I
medical affairs, a little bit of insight. Sorry. We have that insight from Julio on that individual perspective. On our website, Med Affairs Specialist, we can hear testimonials like Emmanuel's, where leaders in the industry, they want to implement this program for their entire team. They want those who have little to no experience, or they have plenty of experience, and they're looking to level set the entire team with the same amount of knowledge with the highest standards that are set, again, by those industry leaders who developed the BCMS program. So it has a profound impact both at the individual and organizational level. I think Emmanuel still is having trouble with his connection. So let's now, at this point, open the floor to questions from our audience. I saw a few that has come in that I think would be pretty good for our speakers. I also see some questions on BCMS. How do you stay up to date with industry and regulatory changes?
So that's a very good question. I think it's a matter of being proactive and subscribing to newsletters such as First Word, or going on the FDA website. They usually some alerts that you can set as well in order to keep up to speed with the changes. But it's being kind of very proactive and utilizing your colleagues too. There's certain areas of medical affairs that I may not have a deep understanding of or touch on a day-to-day basis, but if you reach out to folks in those departments, then they're able to give you an update as to what's new, what's changing, what's coming down the road. And I found that very valuable to utilize your own internal colleagues.
It's a really good resource.
Yes, you hear me now.
Yes, welcome back, Emmanuel. We can hear
Okay,
you.
good. Yeah, I'm sorry. I moved to another network. Yeah, no, to add on this, for regulatory, I mean, we have an invasion of information today, and you need to decide what you want to get access to and what you can't simply get access to. So I think it's very important to rely on colleagues who are expert in the domain, like typically regulatory, as you mentioned in your question, Nadia, because you can't be on the edge of regulatory if you're not in the regulatory activity. So I personally read, a few newsletters on the systematic basis, the Harvard Business Review, just to remain aware of, let's say, general topics. And I try also to read some medical journals, or at least to list in the field of my activities, which is cardiovascular surgery, to remain, let's say, reasonably informed. But we can't get access to all kind of information. It's just too massive.
Right. We're dealing with so many information sources being fed to us. It's really identifying those that are relevant to you, right? Especially for me, I would think in your therapeutic area, being subscribed to those resources specific to your therapeutic area. That's a good way of how you can narrow down to the regulatory changes that affects you and your organization or your product. Great question. Can more exposure to investigator-initiated studies or trials improve the regulatory and compliance capabilities of the field MSL and headquarters staff, including the HCPs or investigators? This event is low in sub-Saharan Africa.
Just trying to understand the question.
Me as well. Actually, I see two questions here. Yes, clearly, exposure to IS and IIT, I think, is important. And in particular, the design and the interaction with the owners of the IIS or the IIT is very important, because it remains something which is decided and mastered by a hospital group, or let's say private care setting physicians, not by the industry. So this is absolutely crucial to very clearly understand how we can the do's and the don'ts, if I may say so. And that's why I think this is certainly something that helped MSL, I mean, field MSL and HQ staff to grow in their practice and their ability to master with this. So on that first question, yes, fully aligned, agree with you. On the second one, it's clear that depending on countries, you have big differences. I traveled just less than a year ago. I was in South Africa in various cities, visiting cardiac surgeons as part of my job at Edwards, and have some colleagues who are visiting physicians in South Africa on a regular basis. Clearly, we have less IITs and IIS ongoing, let's say, in this example in South Africa, whether in the meantime there is a clear appetite of physicians to develop their own research. So I think it's all about, them to move ahead and to submit protocol and ideas to medical device or pharma companies, because at the end of the day, the IIS has to come. It has to remain a HCP initiative, I think.
So I think understanding that the regulatory aspect to IISs and IITs is important, right? And then as a medical affairs professional, if you understand that, then you can also convey that to the HCPs. You can convey the why we can do something, why we can't do something. I think people always want to know the why. And I think this course or the certification does a good job at giving us that foundational knowledge that we need in order to understand those regulations.
That's a good point. Yes, we have an entire module in BCMS dedicated solely to IIS and IITs. So you could use this as a foundation for your discussion to regulatory or to your HCPs as to why they're important, like you mentioned.
No, it's a very good one. I'm aligned with you, Julio. It's a very good module. I think this is something that should serve as a reference tool. Absolutely.
Including the pre and post quizzes, how long should it take approximately to complete each of the 20 modules?
That's a very good question. I don't know whether I want to answer to this one.
Now, from the content side of ACMA, I will say that there are 40 hours of content. That's what we list here. The modules, they vary in length. Our short modules can take about 30 minutes to complete and knock out. Versus our longer modules, we really go in depth, and our longest module can take on average about 3.5 hours to complete. It's really dependent upon the information in that module, as well as the learner.
So it's clearly a course that needs some consistency. I mean, to do it, let's say, 2 or 3 modules, and then you wait 1 month, and you have 2 or 3 modules, and then you wait 3 weeks, and you have 3 modules. It just doesn't work, for the simple reason that there is a need to step into the program, and this requires, I would say, a significant number of hours, but over a reasonably short period of time. Let's say perhaps 2, 3, 4 weeks, I would say, ideally, or perhaps 6 weeks, because then you are in the spirit of the course and you are taking great benefit of it. If you segment too much, if you have too much time between 2 sessions of work, first of all, you're going to forget, and then I think it's difficult to jump again. So I personally started, and I've done the mistake. So I started something like a year ago in August, and I've done 3 or 4 modules, and then I stopped because I had no time. I was busy with various travels, etc. And then I restarted, let's say 3 or 4 months later, and I realized it was not so easy. And I decided to cover the whole program, and I think I covered it in about 8 weeks, working every single week. I was having between 2 and 4 modules. And that was much more efficient and honestly, much more pleasant for me as a student. So I would say altogether, the level, I mean, the number of hours mentioned by Kiana, but I would say consider probably 4 to 8 weeks with a little bit of work every week if you want to get the benefits of that course.
And I agree with you, Emmanuel. I can't remember how much time I put in, but I know I did set up some time on a weekly basis just dedicated to doing the module. So it's a matter of planning ahead and making sure that, as Emmanuel said, that it's consistent. So that worked out well for me.
How does ACMA play a role in actively advocating buy-in for standardized board certification? In other words, how do you create rigorous across-the-board standards while being adaptable to specific needs of each MSL team, individual, and changes in regulatory compliance standards over time? This is a really good question, Rachel. Now, I can speak to you again from the content side of ACMA. The first half of your question, right? How do we create rigorous across the board standards? Like I mentioned prior to, we speak to leaders in the industry, right? Even the discussion that we had today here on this webinar, we work really closely with subject matter experts in this area and multiple areas that we include in the program so that we are always up to date to what is changing industry-wise, metric-wise, standards-wise, so we can build our own internal standards as to what every medical affairs professional should know in this dynamic changing field. Now, how we do that in tandem while also seeing the specific needs of a specific organization or MSL team is that we keep it still very broad. Like there are certain terms that we use in BCMS that may vary depending on the company, right? We use thought leaders or KOLs. KOLs isn't the only term for a thought leader HCP in this space. Some organizations, they call them external experts, for example, right? Those small new details vary from organization to organization. And so when working at an entire team that implements BCMS at one time, their leaders are able to identify those small changes. They usually have journal club discussions where they complete certain modules individually, and then they come together as a team and then identify how those modules implement their day-to-day activities or how it applies to their organization. We also have custom training, right? A lot of our team leaders who love the ACMA and BCMS and the delivery or the deliverables of our content, we build their own training set for them, right? That are tailored specific to their team. That's tailored specific to their therapeutic area as well. So to answer your question in short, we work very closely with leaders, both on a broad scale for our entire BCMS program, but also at an individual organization scale as well. Any suggestions for preparation of the BCMS board exam? How do you both prepare for the exam?
I would just suggest going back and reviewing the materials and making sure that you understand the information, right? It's more of the understanding. If you understand the information, the test is perfectly fine.
I don't think it's a serious exam for sure. You need to go for the module. I would say there are certainly some of the modules for which you are feeling super comfortable with the content, and some modules for which you have more difficulties because this is far from your daily practice. So I personally would recommend to spend a little bit more time prior to the exam to focus on the modules where you feel less comfortable in brackets. But yeah, nothing else.
Good insights. But I will say that we're the only board exam in medical affairs who gives you the materials. Right? We give you those 20 preparatory modules to prepare for the board exam, those pre and post quizzes, the glossary of terms at the end, the question bank at the end. We give you plenty of resources, so take advantage of those in preparation. How often is the program updated? Quarterly. How to deal with fake news in this new world of information, not only to be updated right. We kind of touched on this briefly earlier. We were discussing all the information and how to narrow down the information relevant to you, but also being able to identify what is a credible source of information. That is very key in medical affairs and healthcare as a whole, right? You have to understand the difference between information, misinformation, and disinformation. They all kind of sound the same, but they are very different. And knowing how to identify that as a professional in medical affairs or healthcare practitioner is very key.
Nothing to add, but I agree with you. The difference between misinformation and disinformation is critical. We have seen with COVID the amount of fake news. I mean, it became obvious to the world, and in particular to industry professionals such as us, that there was a massive amount of fake news, including, which probably was a bad impression, fake news, or let's say wrong information coming from hospitals and healthcare providers. So yes, it's a real problem, and I think we have to be cautious. when we are reading things that we are just like uncomfortable with. Good to do a sanity check.
Yeah, nothing to add from my end.
As an aspiring MSL transitioning from regulatory affairs, how would you suggest leveraging the BSMAS certification to break into the medical affairs field? We mentioned that regulatory and compliance is a key area, competency area in medical affairs. So with you already having that experience in regulatory affairs, you have a large chunk of experience that you can translate over to medical affairs. That BSMAS program, again, while you have that competency in that one area, there's 4 other key areas that we just covered today that you have to be competent on as well. That would really level up your transition into that medical affairs. So being able to speak to how you're combining BSMAS with your regulatory affairs experience is how I'd say you can propel into med affairs.
So I think if you're aspiring to be an MSL, I think all the content in this program is relevant, because as an MSL, you basically touch a lot of it, whether directly or indirectly. So I think by leveraging the content that is in the certification program, I think it'll give you more well-rounded approach and understanding of how an MSL can interact with different individuals in medical affairs and the processes that are involved, whether it's investigator-initiated studies or whether it's publications or company-sponsored trials. I think all that information is relevant.
Right.
I think we have time for maybe one more question before we go ahead and close out the webinar this afternoon. For Melissa, how much of this content applies to medical devices study design and not just study design around pharma? This is a good question. We discussed this briefly in the beginning, where we cover in BSMAS multiple areas of life sciences and not only medications or traditional pharma. So we have dedicated modules solely to medical devices. When we cover regulatory affairs later in the BSMAS program, we decipher the differences between the regulatory and clinical trial designs and analysis between medical devices, diagnostics, and again, pharmaceutical medications, even biologics and biosimilars. So we discussed those different areas.
Yes, and I may extend your answer by saying, so I started my career years ago in pharma companies, and I'm now working for a medical device company, Edwards Life Science, for 14 years almost. And I do believe that the training course is fully adapted to a medical device industry environment. There are some obvious differences, and it's clear that phase 4 trial, for example, does not apply to the medtech industry. But I would say in general, it's really accurate and on the edge when it comes to content for people working in a medtech company. So you should not be afraid of, let's say, being outside of the scope with this course. That's not the point.
All right. So that concludes our webinar today. We've covered a lot of ground today in exploring the 5 key competency areas that define excellence in medical affairs, right? Again, from life sciences understanding to technical expertise, regulatory and compliance. We've dived into this comprehensive skill set, knowledge set that's required to truly excel in this field. I'd like to thank our expert speakers, Emmanuel and Julio, for sharing their invaluable insights with us and their personal experiences with BSMAS. We truly appreciate you both for joining us today. Now, as we wrap up today's webinar, I encourage all of you to consider the BSMAS program to elevate your expertise. And if you have any remaining questions about the program or the topics that we've covered here today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on LinkedIn or our website. Our website is medicalaffairsspecialist.org. And again, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate your time and your engagement with us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you on our future webinars. Have a great rest of your day.